Another thing that occurred to me as I was pondering and driving around and starting to get clarity, because I was not drinking anymore, that I was now facing these things that I didn't want to face, or gradually opening up doors and looking at them, little bits and pieces at a time, but wanting to resolve my life. I remembered that I couldn't understand why the world was the way it was, why people were the way they were, why when I was born, I was in an abusive home, mentally and physically, and that when I left there, I was molested, and that then my wife gets pregnant by somebody else. And those are just some of the high points. There's been a lot of things, these cyclical failures that you think, oh gosh, people suck. Why is it this way? And I begin to realize during this time in Oregon when I was doing this reflection, as I looked back on life, that there was one common thing in all of my life experiences that I could look at and say that no matter where I was, no matter where I moved to, no matter what job I changed or life experiences I was changing, joining the military, getting out of the military, running away from home, all of those things, no matter where I went, the failures happened in the same way. But for some reason at this time, it dawned upon me that I was the one thing in common with every one of those. And I don't know why I thought of that. It was a turning point, though, because it made me, along with these other things, start looking at myself instead of looking outward and saying, what are people doing? Why is the world this way? At that moment, I started looking inward and saying, what is the matter with me? What am I doing wrong? And that's a difficult thing, because when you're born, you're not doing anything wrong. You just start developing awareness, and whatever your life is what your life is. It might be loving and kind and good, and it might be very abusive. And we tend to hold on to the things that we don't feel good about and think that our life is worse than anybody else's. I talked to a psychologist one time who told me this story. It was a study that had been conducted. I don't remember where the information was. That's not the important part. It was an important part to hear the story, though. There were two brother and sister combinations that were being talked to for some kind of research. They were in their 30s. Both of them as children, they were about the same age, and both of them as children played house. They had some sort of human interaction that was, we would call it probably inappropriate, or we call it all kinds of things when it's actually just natural behavior. Kids playing together with kids in a sexual manner. One brother and sister combination grew up from that and admitted that, yeah, we did that. Cousins were involved sometimes too, maybe the neighbor kids. But we just blew it off and said that's what kids do, and they were fine. In the other case, the brother and sister hated each other. The girl, now a woman, had been married and divorced a number of times, had very unsuccessful relationships, as did he. They both had unsuccessful relationships. I think he was single at that time, but they hated each other, and they hated that happened. And the point is that it was the same situation that occurred to both of them. The difference was in how they mentally went on their lives managing it. While one brother and sister combination said, we were kids, the other ones lived their lives clinging to that as some sort of pain, anguish, abuse, hatred, and they couldn't let go of it. And that was also important to hear. All of these pieces were coming to me and making me realize I think that my brain is the problem. And of course, at the same time, from the Omni magazine, I'm reading about brain research. And I think we still don't know very much about the brain. I certainly don't. I'm gonna butcher this for any brain scientist out there. But in a nutshell, what I thought of is that my brain, the synaptic activity, somehow the electrochemical process remembers what happened, and it somehow stores the emotional state of it too, and the emotional state happens based on your perceptions of it. If it's something that's very devastating to you, it's going to be stored in a devastating way unless you can figure out a way to relieve the devastation. You can't change what happened. You have to change your perceptions of it. And that your perceptions might make you feel completely devastated while somebody else has something that they would gladly trade you. They would say, what happened to you is nothing. You should see what happened to me. And you listen to their story and you go, oh my gosh, why am I complaining? And then you watch other people that are devastated by things and you listen to their problems and think, that's not a problem. It depends on how we hold it in our thinking, in our processing, how we perceive it and how we live with it. And that's the only difference. The way we think about it, the way we're taught to resolve it. One of the favorite people I like to listen to is Eckhart Tolle. And one of the things that he says that this is just, it comes to mind right now, is right on. You live your life and you have had experiences, but you're not those experiences. You are not those experiences. But when we hang on to those and we give them life and we keep them put away and we want to hide them and we give them that kind of negative energy, they live that way because we create them that way. We make them that way. And we don't know any different. That made me begin to realize that I had to let things go that I was holding on to, that I thought I could never let go before. I surmised that a lot of what was going wrong in my life and what was unfolding in very bad and hurtful ways was because of what I held inside of me, that these things are like entities. They still live. It's an energy thing inside of there. It's a demon. It's a skeleton in the closet. All of those cliche things. The weeds in your garden. The ticking time bomb parts. The things that are put away that you don't want to deal with. And you ignore them, but at some point you realize, oh, you know what? They're acting out. Putting them away doesn't hide them. It doesn't keep them from doing anything. It actually creates problems. You have to open the closets and make friends with them. You have to somehow deal with it. And that meant looking at things and examining the things until it didn't affect you emotionally in the same way anymore. And I realized that's what forgiveness is. And that's the reason why forgiveness is important. Not because you're letting the other person off the hook. It's because when you don't do it, it only hurts you. It doesn't hurt that person to hate that person. It doesn't hurt anybody out there to feel ashamed. But it sure hurts you. And then it became, oh, this is important for me to do. And it's not because of them. It's because of me. And it's because I want to have control of my life. And I want this cyclical failure to stop happening. I have these good things happening and I'm excited. And then it'll fall apart. And then good. And then it's just this constant ongoing cycle. And I didn't want the cycle to happen anymore. I didn't want to feel good and ecstatic and then just devastated. And then gradually move around. I was tired of that. I wanted things to go positive and stay positive. And I realized that what I was carrying inside of me, the conflict, the good and the bad, is what was creating that. I was acting out what was inside of me, not knowing that. I wasn't aware of it. So I had to find ways to forgive. That was not easy. Well, first, before I get into the forgiveness part, I figured that I needed to tell somebody that I got molested. I had a friend at that time that when I was there, that she had some similar issues. And we didn't talk about these kind of details. But I talked to her. We were both like looking for peace and happiness. Her life was a shambles. My life was a shambles. We both agreed and, talked about how come our friends over here, they're so happy all the time. Maybe we're not wearing the right kind of clothes or drinking the right kind of tea or something like that. My tea is not organic. I wonder if that helps. You're trying to figure out how to make your life happy and it's not working. And we were both kind of in that boat. And I talked to her and I said, you know what? I got this idea. I think that I'm supposed to tell you what I don't want to tell you, what I don't want to tell anybody. But I'm scared. I don't want to do it. But it sounds logical to me and I would like to do it. Are you interested in hearing? I think it might affect the healing. And I'd like to experiment, but I want you to promise if I do tell you that you won't tell anybody because I don't want anyone to know. And she said, yeah, okay, let's give that a shot. It's like a week later, we drive out into the desert. I remember she was leaning on the front of my car out in the middle of the sagebrush high country out there on a dirt road. And I'm like pacing back and forth, very nervously in front. She's just leaning against the car, watching me go back and forth. And I can remember looking at her and saying, okay, I'm going to tell you what happened, but I want you to know it's not my fault. And I didn't do anything. And I was a kid and blah, blah. I was caveating everything that I was about to say with excuses as to why, please don't blame me. And I realize now that that's because of the way I felt about it. I don't know how long that went on. 5-10 minutes? Anyway, I finally get to the point where I tell her, yeah, I ran away from home. I was on the streets. I got taken in by somebody who then molested me. And then I cringe. I'm like standing there looking like, here it comes. She's going to just let go and tell me off and tell me to take her back and doesn't want to see, I don't know, whatever it was that I was thinking. I get done and I'm paused waiting and looking at her and she's waiting and looking and it seems like a long time again. It was probably only maybe about 5 or 10 seconds and she finally says, what, that's it? I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I told somebody, I got this out. And they're like, they don't hate me for it. They don't think I'm some creepy, creepy kind of a bad person for that having happened. I know now that that's what I thought about it, what my perceptions were. And it affected me and it hurt. I had a list of a couple of other lesser things to tell her about stealing money out of my dad's wallet one time and, a couple of other things like that. But the biggest one was that molestation. That was the cornerstone of my biggest pain of what needed to really come out. And all I can say is that from a physiological standpoint, it felt like it was about 2 weeks perhaps before I could even feel the ground under my feet. When I got that out and she said, what, that's it? Well, that's okay. I felt like a ton had just come off of my shoulders. And that's very strange because no weight came off, but you're carrying something psychologically so severe, so heavy, that it weighs you down and it affects you. I felt light. And that was an incredible turning point in my life, was realizing that the brain is the spiritual element. Okay, what I want to do at this moment is to bring in a spiritual teaching, an ancient spiritual teaching, and show that it's a parallel to what I'm just talking about right now. This one's a little easy to spot. We don't have to do too much to decipher it. It comes from a group of scriptures from the Nag Hammadi library. They're Gnostic scriptures. I'm going to do a video on the Gnostics and the Nag Hammadi later, so I'm not going to get into it too much right now. Suffice it to say that there are some books in there that were parallel teachings, that were interpretations of what Jesus was teaching that existed at the same time as the Gospels that are in the Bible. They had a little bit different interpretation, and when the Romans put the Bible together, made Christianity the Roman state religion and decided what it would be, they left these scriptures out. It didn't fit with Christianity, but they're teachings of Jesus. One of them primarily the Gospel of Thomas, but the one I'm going to pull from is the Gospel of Philip. This is one that is only 2 layers. You will see that there is kind of the absence of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior and just worship Him. That's not what Gnosticism was about. It was about knowledge. The Gnostics followed the teachings of Jesus, while the Christians that came about from the Romans, you can follow the teachings of Jesus if you want to, but you don't have to. The idea is if you worship Jesus, that's good enough. The Gnostics said, no, we're not doing that. You don't worship the man. They didn't treat him or consider him to be a returning savior. He was a prophet that taught, and we were all on a par with him. So let's take a look at this, and if we use everything that we've discussed so far in the beginning of the videos, it's about me, it's layered, you turn it inward, the soul is the subconscious mind, and that we are going to be metaphoric parallels represented in the story by some other elements. So let's take a look at them and see what they are. This is an excerpt from the Gospel of Philip from the Nag Hammadi library. Most things in the world, as long as their inner parts are hidden, stand upright and live. If they are revealed, they die, as is illustrated by the visible man. As long as the intestines of the man are hidden, the man is alive. When his intestines are exposed and come out of him, the man will die. So also with the tree. While its root is hidden, it sprouts and grows. If its root is exposed, the tree dries up. So it is with every birth that is in the world, not only with the revealed, but with the hidden. For so long as the root of wickedness is hidden, it is strong. But when it is recognized, it is dissolved. When it is revealed, it perishes. That is why the word says, already the axe is laid at the root of the trees. That's reference to Matthew 3:10. It will not merely cut. What is cut sprouts again, but the axe penetrates deeply until it brings up the root. Jesus pulled out the root of the whole place, while others did it only partially. As for ourselves, let each one of us dig down after the root of evil which is within one, and let one pluck it out of one's heart from the root. It will be plucked out if we recognize it. But if we are ignorant of it, it takes root in us and produces its fruit in our heart. It masters us. We are its slaves. It takes us captive to make us do what we do not want, and what we do want, we do not do. It is powerful because we have not recognized it. While it exists, it is active. Okay, so in that chunk of teaching, we can see a couple of parallels that we can relate to. And we should be able to tie the idea of something being hidden away and surviving and growing and doing what it does, being what it is, by leaving it buried, by leaving it hidden away, by not exposing it, that it lives and it exists and it does what it does. And that's exactly what we're talking about with these fears. The fears that are hidden inside are the evils. Those are what I referred to before as trespasses, but they're talking about here as ultimately they're really the bad things that are inside of you. And this is where it's difficult, because people can look at that and say, I didn't do those things. I don't have to take care of that stuff. It wasn't me that molested me. It wasn't me that fill in the blank. What is difficult to get around, but is incredibly important to get around, is that it doesn't matter. What matters is the manner in which you have it stored and the way that it exists inside of your memory. And you can tell that by how it makes you feel. If you can look back on something that was horrific at one time and go, I'm good, well, then you're probably good. If you look back on it and it makes you mad, you see something continually cyclically comes about, and you have even physiological responses, or anger, or lashing out, or crawling into a corner, or you can tell, how does it make you feel when you think about it? If you don't feel good, if you feel ashamed, if you feel any of those things, that's how it's living in there. That's the nature of it. That's not a secret. You just look at that and say, okay, I can tell what it is by looking at it, by feeling it, by accepting it. The tree, the root, same thing. You can cut the tree down, but it grows back. Let's just look at dandelions, perhaps. Some trees don't come back. I think the idea here is that if you have something emerge from you that is not good, and you cut it down, but you don't go after the source, you don't go after the root, like maybe you were molested and you lash out at people who are gay, even though that has nothing to do with molestation, it still nevertheless somehow links that way in your head. So you're lashing out angrily, hatefully at something that is innocent, that's something that you have nothing to do with. And you might get yelled at by somebody, or you might later on think to yourself, oh gosh, I got to quit that. That's not okay. I don't want to be that way. This is that part where it says it makes us do things that we don't want to, and the things that we do want to do, it prevents that. This is it. We're acting out in some way. And you can take, after it happens, you can sit there and say to yourself, I won't do that again. I understand that it's okay. I understand that that's a different situation. But if you're still hanging on to this, if the shame of the experience that you have, if that's still there, that's the root that's going to cause it to come out again. Saying I'm not going to do it again is like chopping it down, but it comes back. The only way to get rid of it is to go after the root, the source, the point of origin for this activity, what the seed of what you carry in your mind that creates that activity. And that's what this verse is about, and that's what this is teaching us. And we can see it there without the Christian layer. And what does it say? Jesus went into the place and cleaned out the whole place. That means he went after everything. I kind of see that as we can all do this if we want to do that. Again, they're not treating Jesus in this scripture like the Son of God that's going to come back and you need to worship him. They're treating it like a Buddha character, where this individual became enlightened and he went all the way. He didn't just resolve a couple of things. He went and resolved everything. He took care of his past until he was so peaceful and loving and caring and understanding that he had cleaned out the whole place. He weeded his entire garden. He made friends with all the skeletons in his closet. He cast out all the demons of the man of the tombs. All of those are metaphoric parallels for this same process. The spiritual, the inward, the mental process. That's what we have access to. And in doing that, it creates different conditions in your brain state, not just in your conscious thinking, but the stuff that's going on in the background. That stuff exists in there. It's not just hidden away. You think it's hidden away, but it's actually an energy. It's sitting there ready to emerge anytime something in the environment triggers it. You can either go hide away someplace and disappear and hope it'll never trigger, or you can live life and say, I just need to resolve these things. Again, this comes about through forgiveness. And that is another lesson, because forgiveness, boy, anybody can say, just forgive, just forgive. What does that mean? You know, there's a mechanics to it. There's a process to this. And let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so what is that process? Well, first of all, we realize that there's a lot of kind of benign things that we can forgive people over. Maybe you're mad at somebody and you realize, oh, it's not that big of a deal, or there was some extenuating or mitigating circumstances that made them do something and you realize, oh, it's not their fault. We can easily forgive people. It's what is forgiveness? It's letting it go. It's not holding them accountable in your own mind, which when you think about is kind of goofy. So you hold something against them in your mind and it bothers you. What does it do to them? It only does something to you. But we're talking about forgiveness for something that's very intense, very deep, very hard, something that has created in you probably years or maybe a lifetime of hurt, hatred, shame, something that is very, very tough. How do you forgive if somebody has done something so much that you don't know how to forgive them? And you can say to yourself, I forgive them. I don't want to hold this burden anymore. But you find yourself feeling that way again and again and again. It's like, I forgive them. Why do I hurt? Why am I acting out? Why is something still there? This is that root that's still in there. What we have to remember is that the memory of what happened is there and the emotional state is what's there. We have to change the emotional state in order for the forgiveness to happen. Instead of trying to describe it on what to do, I'll just tell you what I did. My childhood stuff, anger with my mom, anger with Larry leaving me, all of those things I'm not going to address right now. Those are different. I would always tell people about those stories. I didn't hold them inside. They hurt me, but I didn't hold them in. The ones that I needed to talk about was the molestation, anything that was shameful that I didn't want to tell anybody because it made me feel bad about myself. And I didn't want other people to feel that way. And I didn't realize they wouldn't have felt that way, but I thought so. It's my own feelings. That's the way it works inside of us. That's why we don't tell people. We are afraid. We're taught, at least in our culture, tough it out, keep it inside, wah wah, suck it up. That's spiritually destructive. That hurts. Think about it. If you've been molested or raped or something like that and you feel very ashamed about it, or you've done something or had something done to you that you are very ashamed about, it's not tough to keep it inside. It's tough to get it out. The tough people aren't the ones that keep their mouth shut. The tough people are the ones that can open up, that can express it. We got it backwards. Opening it up and getting it out is what affects the healing. So in my case, what did I have to do? I was living on the streets. I got taken in by somebody who then molested me, violated me. That was hell. What do I have to look at? Well, I was 15 years old and living on the streets. I was already beginning to consider, I wonder how long I will live here. How long I will be alive. I didn't think I would survive. The guy that took me off the street said, you're going to die out here. He's probably right. If something didn't happen to intervene to get me off the streets, I probably would have died out there. If it wasn't him, it could have been somebody else. I was not permanently hurt. I came from an abusive home to living on the streets, to having a job, to joining the military, to getting an education, to furthering myself in life. It was a step along the way. Is it a preferred step? No. Would I recommend that? No, obviously not. What I'm doing at this point, though, in my mind, or as I'm growing and healing, is I'm reasoning out that it's not the devastating situation that I hold on to it being. That the reason it is so severe is because I keep it so severe. That I have to realize, you know what? You're okay. Being able to talk about it and being able to say something, being able to strip it off as my garment, as it were, shows me that I'm okay. That's a measure of healing. When you can take something that you've decided you will never tell anybody because it's so shameful, you will take it to your grave. When you can talk about that freely, like, yeah, it happened, then you've healed. You have to find a way to reason out that it's okay, that you're okay now, that is something that happened to you along the way, but it isn't you. You survived it. You did good. You can move on from it. But you can only move on from it by letting the other person off the hook, because ultimately it doesn't let them off the hook. It changes your brain state. And what you maintain in your brain and the emotional state is what gets triggered by things in the environment that trigger it. Whenever paths cross with another situation, or you see something on TV or in life or in a relationship or something, you will get triggered repeatedly as long as that stays there like that. If it's a problem for you, the only way to fix it is to get rid of the way you feel about it. That's it. You can't change what happened. You can't change the other person. You can't go back in time. From this moment, right here, right now, the only thing you can do is change the emotional state that you hold towards that situation. And you can tell whether it's been successful or not by thinking about it and seeing how you feel and being able to talk about it freely. If you can talk about it freely, you got it. That's why I said early on, you got to tell somebody. And I don't know that you have to tell somebody, but I believe if you're healed, it won't matter that you tell somebody. It seems like it's part of the process. Anyway, Gospel of Philip, bingo. Pull it out from the root. Expose it. I know this video took a long time. In fact, I think all of mine do. I wrestle with being verbose. Sometimes I feel it's important to tell the details of, you got to someplace strange, and instead of just telling somebody, here's where you need to be, I try to demonstrate a reasoning for being there, how I got there and why, what it took. I don't want the videos to continue going on this long and being this detailed. I don't know how many people are going to be interested. But I'm not trying to grow the channel. I'm trying to present or just document my history, my path, to leave it there as a record for somebody else who says, I'm going to give this a try. But what should be evident is that it's a very personal path. When they say the spiritual path is individual, that's because it goes inside of you. Nobody else can walk that path. Only you can. Yes, it is very individual. We all walk different paths because we've had different experiences. But ultimately, we're trying to get to the same place. Buddha's nirvana, Jesus' kingdom of heaven within. A blissful state, a happy place in life. Having things happen and unfold for you that are more in your control. Obviously, we can't control everything, and there are factors that happen in the environment that can work against us that we have no control over. But there's a lot of things that we do have control over that we bring with us, and we don't know how to set those down. Or perhaps we know how to, but we're too fearful to. The shame, the idea of admitting to it is too great. And that's a lot of people. A lot of people will hold on to their fears and their anger and justify it continuously. They will never look inward. They will look outward for some answer, or they will just simply live their life thinking that it sucks. This is information that will help anybody that wants to look inward. And it's not the only way, I don't think. Although I believe no matter what path you take, it's accomplishing the same thing. It's changing the energy of your brain state. It's changing the electrochemical state of your gray matter, which affects a change in your life. I don't know how much of the brain reaches out. I know that I've had ESP experiences. Yeah, minor, small ones. I'm not a mind reader. I don't mean anything like that. Just things that boggle your mind as being, how there's got to be something bigger. Anyway, in this video, I wanted you to see that I came from a place that was not fun. It wasn't okay. And that along the path of escaping that, more bad things happened. You're in a bad place trying to get to a good place. You don't instantly just be in a good place. There are bad things that are going to cycle along your path. If you don't learn and you don't make changes along the way, you stay in that bad area. In order to escape it, you have to learn some things, and you have to learn how to leave some things behind that keep you connected to that place, to that memory, to that experience, to really being the kind of person that is cyclically moving ahead, but continues to have cyclical failures, and they're self-sabotage. You know they come from you, and they're things you don't want. This is how to recognize them, how to deal with them, how to make friends with them, and realize the only thing you can do is change the way that they exist, to change the way they feel. It's an emotional changing process, and that takes looking at it in so many possible ways that you can disassociate yourself from it. We're not alone on this planet in experiencing hurt. And if you're going from one place to another, you've got to take steps along the way. This video is meant to show you the path that I took, and that I believe the path I took is what is exactly nested into our religious and philosophical and spiritual teachings. I've decided in the next video not to try to match Moses and Buddha. I think Moses is too obscure, actually. It takes a lot of different, really expansive metaphoric thinking to bring Moses into light. Jesus is very simple, actually. Jesus is very Buddha-like, just taught in a Judeo-Christian language and tone, the flavor of his people and time. But using the same process to decode, let's look at Jesus. Let's look at how Jesus taught what the Buddha taught. So until next time, be happy, look inward, and remember, there is just one truth. At the bottom of everything, no matter what works, physically in this cosmos, there's one thing that makes it work, and that's what we're getting to.